Okay, we'll get started as people keep coming in. So today we're going to talk about what is new with Formative. My name is Jill Whalen. I am a strategic customer success manager here at Formative, and I have been in education for 18 plus years. So in the classroom, K through 12, as an ed tech coach, a science teacher, also did a little bit of assessment work with higher ed, and also was a professor to teacher ed program. So I've kind of done the gamut. So I hope what I can share with you today are new updates, and then also maybe offer some solutions of why these would be good or why we're doing these updates. So we're going to talk about a couple different things today. We're going to start talking about some basic visual changes that you may have noticed with Formative. We're going to move on to talk about dashboards and classes and what are some updates there. We'll move on to the formative level. So what are some question types or different features within formative questions when you build a formative that you're actually seeing? We'll move to the view responses and the tracker, some different things that you'll notice there that you can do now, which are amazing. And then we'll finish with the admin tab in case we have any administrators on the call or any of you that are acting as admins for Formative. So let's get out of this PowerPoint and let's get started into Formative. We're going to start with, like I said, those visual updates. So you may have noticed we've been doing a lot of visual changes, and you might come in every other day, right? And there's something else that you're noticing. And I want you to kind of know why those are happening. So the reason that we're having these visual changes is all based on accessibility. So although you might think, oh, I really liked how it looked before, keep in mind that we are doing this to make Formative accessible to everybody, so that everyone can use the platform the way it was designed. So if you see something change, we appreciate feedback, but we may not be able to switch it back. We may have done that purposefully for accessibility issues. So just keep that in mind. Some of the changes you've been seeing. So you've been seeing some changes up here with colors. Maybe icons are looking a little bit different. If we go into a formative, let me see, I have some data here for this one. Let's view responses. We can see that some of the colors look a little bit different. We can see that the feedback looks a little bit different. That icon is a little bit larger. Before it was very tiny. We see a lot more white space. Before, when we were in a formative, right, we had the eyeball for previewing. Now it is just a preview button. So lots of different things that we've seen on the edit tab, on the view responses tab. If we go back to kind of the tracker as well, we see different components like this that look a little bit different. If you have a Google class, and I don't have one here right now that I've looked at, let me grab a Google class. We now have kind of imported the Google icons or avatars, if you will, for students. So in this case, you can see, oh, do we have any? Oh, we don't have any. The avatars are there. So I can show you kind of in classes. So here's a Google class. Let's put it down to teachers. You can see some of their avatars are coming in. If you are a Google Classroom user, and the avatars are not coming in and you know students have them, you can go ahead and just resync your class, and those avatars should pull in for you. So that's something else. Remember to resync, you just click on here and then you would just Google sync again. So that's if you're a Google user. Let's go back to the dashboard. So our formative dashboard, what are some changes that have been there? My dashboard has a lot of formatives and a lot of classes. Yours probably does not because you've archived those, as you should if you're not using them this year. But if you scroll all the way to the right, you're going to see this blue plus button. I always say the blue buttons are kind of the go-to buttons. So now you can actually, without going to the classes tab like you had to before, you can actually create a new class right on the dashboard. Gives you all of that same information. Here we see some more visual colors, a little darker, deeper that we've changed. You can do everything to set up your class as you would on the classes tab. Why you might want to do this in general, right? If you're getting classes imported, you might want to create a class manually because you are taking a class of students and you are doing flexible grouping. And so you kind of want to turn that flexible grouping into a class. So you could do that here. You could also maybe create a class if you're doing a special project and you want to kind of put students in groups and you want to kind of put them in those groups, but kind of think of it as a class. So you can distribute different materials to those students that are working on the different projects. All right. One of the other things you can do before, you could move a folder. So you could click on a folder and you could move it, but you could only move one at a time. What you're able to do now is you can click on multiple folders and you can move all of those folders into one area. So if you are trying to clean house with formatives as we're coming up to the home stretch of the school year, this might be helpful, right? You can create a 21, 22 folder, and maybe you want to put all of your formatives in there and kind of house them there. That's an easier way to kind of move all those formative folders or formatives at once versus one at a time. That's very tedious, and we're all about saving teachers time at formative. Something else that you can do, and this is the students. The students now have the ability to actually organize the way that they view the formatives. So in their dashboard, they have a list of formatives. Now they can actually click and they can sort by closed formatives, aka submitted. They can sort by open formatives. So all the opens are going to appear there on their screen, or they can just do by all. So they can have everything on their screen. So we're always trying to enhance the student experience, and they have had little organization up to this point. So this is kind of the first piece of student dashboard organization, is they can kind of hide a little bit of what they don't want to see to make their dashboard a little less cluttered. All right, let's go into the classes tab. And if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat. I have the chat up. I'm monitoring that as we go through. The biggest piece of the classes tab is when you add a student, and you may have had this experience, maybe you haven't come across it yet. It comes a lot of times at the beginning of the school year. We'll have teachers write in and say, I have this student, I tried to add them to my class, but it refuses to add them to my class. What's going on? And at Formative, if I hear that, my number one thing is the student probably inadvertently signed up for a teacher account. And you can't add teachers to accounts or to classes as students. You can always add a teacher as a co-teacher, but you can't add them as a student. So if I want to add a student to my algebra class, I can click this plus and it brings this up. Now, if I go to add that information, so the student's name, their email, and then I say add student, I'm going to now get this alert. Before you wouldn't get this alert, it just wouldn't let you do it. Now you're going to actually get an alert that says, hey, this student actually has a teacher account. Again, only students can be invited as students to the class. So here's how you can change this. So if you click here, it takes you directly to a help article on how do you delete an account so that you can now have that student create a student account and successfully be added to your class. So that's a nice little piece just to kind of tell you if it's an error, what the error is, and how do you fix that error. So again, that's if you're trying to add a student, but they've signed up as a teacher, that's how you're going to be able to know that. All right, let's go over to the formatives dashboard. So let's go into a particular formative. One of the things that we've changed, so before, if you were a person that liked to either use emojis or give your students by the free response the ability to use the emojis, before we had that emoji on there that was the middle finger emoji, was part of the kind of the emoji package. We have since been able to remove that. So I know probably for my middle and high school teachers, not having that in here is beneficial, right? So I wanted to note that no more middle finger emoji. Rubrics. So I have a formative here, creating virtual science labs. And down here, I have a rubric that I've used for this. What I want to show you here is that rubrics can now use decimal points. So before you had to have whole number scores, but now you can do decimal points, and you can do them quite out quite a bit, right? So I can go out quite a bit. And then when I go back into that, I see that I have a 2.755 if I clear over. So the ability to add decimal points and gives kind of that like partial credit a little bit is going to be helpful, I think, for some folks. All right, let's go to section headers. So we see up here, before it was always blue. It was always blue. It never changed, right? That was kind of like the formative theme. Now, if we go to the triple dot menu, we can go to customize header. And you have the ability now to change the color of that header on your formative by individual formative. So if I want to make it purple, I can make it purple. You see it's changed already. Once I hit done, it will solidify that. Now, if you want to upload a picture, maybe you have a picture, you want to put that as the header. I've seen that before. You can do that. If you have something from your Google Drive that you also want to add as the header, you can do that. So it just makes the formative a little bit more personalized than it did in the past. If you name your class, if you do your class by color, right? If you want to make sure that the formatives, you know, if you're sending just a formative to maybe your honors class, maybe those headings are all the same color. So that's another indicator to you that, oh, this is red, it goes to the honors class. Might be something of interest, or maybe you just want to spruce it up a little bit. All right, the numeric question type. And let me see if I have a numeric question type up here. I do. So the numeric question type, you can now choose. So before, right, when you had responses or answers, you had to think of everything and you had to think about spaces. So students could put X equals 4 and that would be correct. But what happens if students put X space equals space 4? You had to account for that either in the answer key here, or you had to go back and grade it manually once the students responded to the formative. What we've done now is we have allowed you to get rid of these white spaces. So I don't even need this response anymore. As long as students have X equals 4, if they have X space equals 4, X space equals space 4, it doesn't matter. If I turn on ignore white spaces, it's now going to ignore those extra white spaces. And it's just going to be looking for the X, the equals, and the 4. And if it sees that, it's going to mark it correct. So this is going to be huge for a lot of people that I know they couldn't think about the spacing, all the opportunities it was for students to put in spacing, or maybe you wouldn't think they put in spacing, or they accidentally put in a space and then it marks it incorrect when the answer is really correct. So consider toggling on this ignore extra spaces for your numeric responses, so you don't have to list a whole bunch of different answer choices. Something else, the Math Live keyboard. Before, when you clicked on a question to do the Math Live keyboard, that keyboard kind of pulled up from the bottom of the formative, right? Now, if you click onto the short answer, it kind of just lives within this space. So I can actually enter my information, and then I'm good to go. All right. If I do the next one, again, the keyboard is living within here. And if you haven't seen the new math keyboard and you're a math person or a science person, feel free to check it out. Lots of different abilities now, and this is kind of ever changing. We're still trying to develop this before we push it out to other question types. So take a look at that. That's something new compared. Now, if you always want to go back to the old keyboard, you have the ability to click that as well. But really, I think this gives you a lot more power than you had before. So that's something with the Math Live keyboard and numeric questions. I want to talk a little bit about assigning or sharing. So before, you could share a formative, and you could share different ways. You could always go to here and share it. But what you had was everything was available on this one kind of modal. Now it's not, right? So now you have the ability to share. You can enter the email of someone, but you also now have the ability to get the direct link. So this is great if you just want to share the direct link with someone. You don't have to type in all the emails. So if you want to share to a larger team, so much easier to send them an email, right? And just share the direct link than type in all of their email addresses. If you want to publish to the library, you go to the next tab. Similar as we saw before, same publishing abilities, but just kind of presented in a different way. And again, if you want to send a copy to somebody to use so they don't change your assignment, but they can do with it what they'd like, you can put the URL here, and you can share that in a couple different ways. So just a matter of tabs now for each of the options versus everything living kind of on one level. All right. Publishing to the library, sending a copy, we talked about that. Great. Let's talk about the library. So now what you can do is you can search the library, and let me actually open up a new formative here. Let's do this. And we go to the library, we can search now by language. So if you are someone who wants to see all of the formatives that are Spanish, in Spanish, you can do that by just putting on the Spanish filter. If you want to do French, you can do that, and you can pull up all the French ones. So that is an ability. Now, this means that whoever published the formative actually had to tag it as being in French in order for it to be filtered. But if you're a world language teacher, this is something that might be very helpful. So you're not just looking through all of the formatives, you can filter a little bit better. All right, some other things with the library. So we go back to our formative, and let's say that we want to add a question. We want to add a question from existing items. So what we can do now too is we can search here from the library, again, by those language pieces, but we can also search in the public library, we can search by standards. So let's say that I want to look at standard 1, 2, and that's what I'm interested in, right? I want to see all of the questions or formatives that are listed with those standards. Now I see this, and I can actually add whatever question along with the standard because these have been tagged. So it's almost like a little item bank, if you will, by standard for you to kind of select from. And you can add standards once you grab this question, but now the ability to kind of search by standards through the library item is going to be, I think, helpful for a lot of people. All right, let's go to view responses. So I'm going to pull up another formative here. Actually, yeah, let's pull up another one. Let's do our partner demo. I think we have some data there. Right here, perfect. So let's go to view responses. Some of the things with view responses, the export, you can now export student responses, or you can export standard scores. So before you just did student responses, you now have the ability to export the standards as well. So that might be of interest to some of you. If we look at this, and we look at kind of the information here with students, let me pull down some actual data here. So down here, we talked a little bit about the icons. Something else that you'll see here now is, so before we had these check marks, if we hover over it, it tells us when the student opened the formative and when they submitted it, kind of a timestamp. If it was gray, they opened it at one point. We don't know if they ever answered any questions yet, but they have not submitted it. So that's something good to know. But now we have these little gray dots over here, and these turn green when the student is actually in the formative. So it's a great way, especially if you're doing kind of maybe an asynchronous lesson, or you are doing a virtual learning, right? And you're having them at home. Maybe it's still synchronous, but they're doing this like independent work. Or you just want to know if students are in the formative. Maybe you told them to be on at a certain time or to do the homework. You want to see who's been in there, who's in there now. You can see a green dot, right? So if JT is green, I can respond and give feedback to JT as I watch him work. Maybe I see that he's got a lot wrong and I want to say, hey, go back and take a look at this. Question 5, I think you're missing the formula that you're supposed to be using. Don't forget, use this formula. Anything like that, but you can give some feedback kind of in the moment by knowing who is actually online in the formative and who is not. One of the other huge things, this is really exciting, group by standards. So right now and before, you would just have your questions up here. What we can do now is for this one formative, we can click on group by standards, and it changed our view. It now put all of the questions for this standard together. We see question 1 here, was tagged with 5 standards. So we can see what those look like. Over here, we have questions 2 and 3 were tagged with the same standards. So we've clumped those together, and we get to see how students have performed on that standard, because it gives us kind of an average of these 2 questions. So in this case, right, remember, when it is gray, it needs to be graded by you. So it is only accounting for what has been auto-graded. That's why it's a 0 here, right? We still have to grade this. But it does give us that percentage, and then it also gives us a class percentage overall. So 50%, right, percentage for students understanding RL 9 to 10.6. So this is huge, that you can now really do kind of an item analysis of standards and questions and really break this down. So that's a huge thing. One of the other things is hiding students' names. You could always do that, but it looks a little bit different now. So that's just kind of a new toggle. Let's go into the tracker. So let's go into the tracker. Some new things with the tracker. So we have on our formative screen, right, we have the ability to kind of sort. We've always had that ability. That kind of not changed. What has changed, though, is this. So let's say that you are an admin or a PLC leader and you want to look at this one assessment that multiple teachers have given, right? We have Jill as a teacher, we have Sarah as a teacher here. What I can do now is I can hide the names, and now I can display the data for teachers too, and it doesn't tell me whose class this is. So that's huge. I know a lot of teachers or PLC leaders were going in, taking screenshots and hiding the names or blacking them out. Now, just like with students, you can just toggle on that button and you can display this data. No one knows whose class this was, whose students got what grades, but you can talk about the data meaningfully. All right, the other thing is standards. So standards, what you can do now is you can search by a formative. So let's say that I want to just see what, I have a food chains formative. I just want to see the standards for food chains formatives. I can do that here again, right? So now if I break down in the tracker my formatives, I see just the standards for this particular formative. This helps a lot for individuals that are using the tracker but are really just focused on standards for a particular formative. It's going to help a lot so that you don't see all of that information. It can be very overwhelming. This hopefully will help you break it down a little bit. One of the other things is before, standards were very much kind of scattered as to, on the left side, what was the standard that was assessed most recently, all the way down to back in time. So what you can do now is over here, sort by standards. You can actually go in here and you can change the way that they're sorted alphabetically, or most recent or least recent answered. So that might help as well, because I know the alphanumeric was really important for people, and it was very hard for them to really take a look at those standards when they were shifted all around. Hopefully this is a little bit cleaner. I know we've gotten a lot of good feedback about this. Filtering tabs, everything now on the tracker is the same as you had in kind of the view responsive formative. So that's really helpful. Now, if you want to look at another formative, all you have to do is click here. You can X here and you can actually type in a new formative. Or if you just want to look at all of your results in the last half year, because that's what I've set it, I can do that. And then all of my standards will appear again for all of my formatives. Okay, so that's another use for that. Let's finish off by the admin tab, the last things that we have to do. So let's start in the common assessments. You can now filter by assessment type. So if you have tagged a common assessment by, let's say it's an exit slip, you want everyone to give these exit slips. Now it's just going to pull up all of your exit slips that were tagged as common assessments or published to the library as common assessments. This again might be helpful if you want to look at certain information, right? Maybe you want to look at a pre-test and then compare to a post-test. That would be very helpful for you. Something else, again, here, teachers' names can be hidden. Let's see if we have any. We don't have any data here. Let's go to all so we see some data. And oh, there we go. We have some data. We'll put it out a little bit so we get more data. But again, just like in the tracker, you can hide teachers' names, which is, again, going to be very helpful for PLCs or administrative meetings that you don't want people to see this. And of course, it's going to take forever to load the data. But very similar, you would just tag hide names, and that would take the teachers' names away as well as the students' names. So very helpful. Let's see if we have some data here. Right, so here's Carol and Todd. Those are the teachers. We hide the names, and then now that we don't see them, we also can come down here and we have all the names hidden as well. Okay, so that's very helpful. That's with the admin tab. One of the things that I would like to point out to you is our training center. So if you do not make it a habit to come to these What's New with Formative meetings, I really encourage you to do that, or to go back and watch the webinars. They all are recorded on our training center. You can find them here. The webinars coming up, but then you can scroll down and you can see everything that we've done, how long it is, and then the recording there. We are making changes like crazy. Every day something is coming out and we are having new changes, and it's amazing to me how many changes we're making. So really, I encourage you to just take that kind of, even scroll through the video really quickly, but just get an idea of what is new, because we're doing a lot of new exciting things, and we have so much more that's coming down with our roadmap that I think you're going to find really helpful. So thanks for joining me today. Again, our training center page, I will put this in the chat. It's really great to have. It also has our formative courses, which are self-paced. If you have not joined our community center, please do that. If you want to become a formative certified champion, we're actually doing kind of a raffle now. If you become a champion, you get entered into a raffle to win, I think it's a whole year free. So that's exciting. And then events and conferences, if we're going to be anywhere, check those out. And then if you are on LinkedIn, join our community page. It's a great way for teachers to connect that are formative users and share what they're doing. So thanks so much for joining me today. If you have any questions, feel free to post those in the chat. I'll stick around for a few minutes. If not, you will not hurt my feelings if you get offline now. But thanks for listening to hear what's going on with Formative and what's new. Have a great day, everybody.